All right, I see a few folks still logging on, but we're going to go ahead and get started. Hello, everybody. My name is Paula Levitt, and I oversee experiential learning programs, including internships and virtual internships at UC Davis. And I am very excited to welcome you today to our event, Virtual Global Internships, where we have a panel of professionals chatting about benefits, tips for success, and transferable skills for your future. So thank you for attending. We have students today from all across the UC system. For starters, I wanted to tell you a little bit more about the Global Learning Hub, which is part of UC Davis. The Global Learning Hub actually is a resource for anybody, including other UC students, where students can find global learning opportunities that are available in California, across the world, globally focused programs that can happen locally, virtually, and internationally. It's where you can find out more about study abroad, global internships and research, community engagement, and skills in leadership. So feel free to check out our website to learn more. We have a search tool that might be helpful for some, as well as program information. To get started, I am going to introduce the three panelists that we have today. Our first panelist, Kelly Holland, is the Director of Institutional Relations for the organization Global Experiences. A Pennsylvania native, Kelly first left the US at age 20 to spend a semester in Granada, Spain, with the American Institute of Foreign Study. She returned several years later to teach English for the Spanish ministry and holds a Master's of Ed in Comparative and International Education from Lehigh University and a BA in International Business and Spanish. She's worked in international education since 2010. Our second panelist, Leah Levy, is the co-founder and director of Connect 123 Global Internship Programs, which is a provider of academic internships partnered with universities and academic institutions. Prior to launching Connect 123 in 2006, Leah, who is South African, worked in communications in Cape Town, business development and marketing in Moscow, and is currently based in Barcelona. And then lastly, our final panelist, Jillian Lowe, is the Director of University Partnerships at Virtual Internships and CRCC Asia, where she leads in the development of partnerships worldwide, supporting building standard and custom international internship programs, both in person and virtually. She holds an MA in International Development and Education. And so the way that this panel is going to work today is I'm going to start by asking each of the panelists a question related to the topic of our program, which is benefits of virtual internships and transferable skills for virtual internships. Why should I complete a virtual internship? At the same time, I would invite you all to ask any questions you might have about virtual internships, and in particularly global virtual internships. All of these folks that are on the call today as panelists do work in the field organizing virtual internships for students, and they also partner with UC Davis and other UCs to organize programs for students where students can actually earn UC credit if they're interested. We're not going to talk specifically about the programs today. It's more about what are the benefits of a virtual internship, especially for those of you who are considering it. We do have other sessions throughout the showcase that I'll tell you about at the end that you might be interested in. So I want to invite all students who are on this call to utilize the Q&A function. If you have any questions that you either have for a specific panelist or for anybody on the panel, and we'll be asking those questions as appropriate throughout the rest of the session. So we can get started on our questions right now. The first question I'd like to ask to Jillian of Virtual Internships: why should students consider a virtual internship, and what are the benefits of virtual internships?
Yeah, and I think that's a wonderful question to start with. And I think the answer of why complete a virtual internship, the foundation is why complete an internship? Because to emphasize, a virtual internship is an internship. It is real work experience with a real company and getting real outcomes that you can apply to your resume, cover letter, interview skills, and more for post-graduation employment. And so when you look at why complete an internship, first and foremost, it's to get a job, right? The ISIMS class of 2020 report noted that 70% of recruiters ranked past work experience, then communication skills, and then references and referrals all over the importance of your college major. And what this means for you is that an internship, and in fact, multiple internships, really should be a part of your academic plan to really allow you to gain that experience, apply it to your resume, and increase your post-graduation prospects. Another reason to complete an internship is for career exploration. A fun fact is that one estimate says that 65% of primary school students, those studying in elementary school, will join the workforce in a job type that does not yet exist today. Furthermore, we know that millennials and you Gen Zers are really known to be job hoppers. While this means that you'll most likely spend less than 3 years in your first career and hop around in multiple careers, 5 to 8 throughout your professional lifetime, what this ultimately means is that we now have a slew of new jobs that we don't even know that existed, and this opportunity to bounce around with different careers. And so what will ultimately become increasingly important is your ability to understand your goals, your career pathway, and in the simplest form, what you like to do at work and what you don't like to do at work. And completing an internship is really important to experience those opportunities, learn the workplace culture, the tasks you like to do, and so that you can really look at these opportunities and assess them correctly to benefit yourself and allow yourself to pick the right career path. And finally, you do an internship for skills gain. 3 in 4 employers say that they have a really difficult time finding graduates with soft skills that their companies need. Soft skills like communication, critical thinking, and interpersonal skills. And so internships allow you to directly develop these skills, see what they look like in a professional, non-academic setting, as these do really look different. And really importantly, allow you to get feedback from a supervisor that can tell you what skills you need to develop, what skills you really need to enhance, and what skills you're great at, so that when you do apply, you're not part of those 3 and 4 employers that really are having a hard time. These employers have found you and they found the right soft skills. So if you look at why doing an internship, those all apply to why do a virtual internship. But the real great benefits of a virtual is the first and foremost, the obvious one, accessibility. So by doing a virtual internship, you have more flexibility of your schedule and time to fit into your already busy school schedule, summer schedule, life schedule. In fact, when I did my master's degree 5 years ago, I actually did a virtual internship, not COVID related, not anything. It was because I wanted to fit in a virtual internship while completing my full-time master's program and maintaining a social life. And by doing a virtual internship in another country, I was able to gain cultural experience, work experience, and still manage to have that social professional balance. Another reason you do remote is that accessibility of a place, right? You limit the geography so you can be anywhere. And you also removes commute. When I deliver in-person internships, I'd say the #1 complaint from students is, I hate my commute. We picked really cool cities, London, Paris, Shanghai, Melbourne. These are also really cool large cities with the average commute over 1 hour one way. So if you look at commute, the average commute in San Francisco is 32 minutes one way. If you remove that over a 50-week period, you will get 12 days of your year back. 12 full days to address to mental health, your personal well-being, or just social life. And so that really allows you to benefit from a virtual opportunity and the lack of commute. And then the final most important benefit of virtual internships is that the future of work is remote. In 2020, 70% of companies delivered some or all of their internships remotely. And in 2021, despite of what COVID does, many companies have already confirmed that they will remain virtually. Google announced that all internships will be virtual in 2021 because 97% of their students in 2020 were satisfied with the program. The exact same amount of percent that were satisfied with their in-person internships in 2019. When I say that the future of work is remote, I don't think we're going to be all hunkered down behind our computer in 5 or 10 years and nobody's going to be commuting. In fact, in the US, they estimate that 35% of jobs cannot be completed remotely. But for that 65%, what will happen is hybrid work experience will come out, where employers allow their employees to work 1, 2, or 3 days a week so that they can lower the overhead cost and the employee can get time back, saving that commute and personal well-being. And so they will need staff that know how to work remote. And so a benefit of a virtual internship is that you yourself will gain virtual work experience and be able to apply that and shine on your resume. When we ask our interns that completed our summer internship, over 1,000 completed, and we asked, did you actually gain work experience? 88% said they gained confidence in delivering successful remote work experience, and 65% increased their interest overall in working remotely over in person. So it's a really great benefit. So to complete a virtual internship, you're gaining the same opportunities as that in-person internship and the end goal of getting a job in the future, while still maintaining accessibility and adapting to the future of remote work.
Thank you so much. Kelly or Leah, do you have any comments or anything additional you might add to that?
I would just echo two important sentiments that Jillian made. She did say that just because it has the word virtual in front of it doesn't mean it's not an internship. So a virtual internship should not be super distanced from an internship experience. They're both valid in their own right. And this idea that virtual or remote will not go away is so important. I love thinking ahead to what a hybrid work experience looks like, where not only our interns, but ourselves are splitting our time between our home offices and also perhaps wherever we're meeting with our staff, because it's true that even real estate is changing and that affects how we see virtual internships in the future. So really great points, Jillian.
Agreed. Nothing else to add from my side because it was quite well explained.
Great. Before I move on to the next question, we did get a question in the chat box that I think is appropriate to answer now. And that's, how does a virtual internship work? Do you have to be in the country where the internship is, or is it more like working from home?
Yeah, I can answer that. So first, we make it really confusing for all students. Remote work, telework, virtual work, we call it all these different things. And really what it means is that you are completing work behind your computer from the comfort of wherever you exist right now. So that could be home, in non-COVID, or in certain areas, it could be from a coffee shop, but it means that you can work where you are comfortable and you don't have to relocate to to complete the internship. So when we complete our global virtual internships, in fact, most students are at home completing their internship or their work experience with staff, supervisors, and companies in different countries. So they're navigating different time zones. They're communicating over Zoom, just as we are, WhatsApp, text, and email.
And I'll just add that you could also be intentionally moving, right? Like, I have a friend who teaches and is intentionally moving to another place to teach remotely. I intentionally moved to another country to do my master's program remotely because I didn't have to be in a place. So you could use this as an opportunity to intentionally be somewhere else, even if it's in the country where your internship is. You know, in the future, of course, when travel restrictions are lifted. I'm going to move on to the next question. And I do see some more questions popping up in the chat, which is great. Please feel free to add them there. We will get to them at the end. But this next question, I'm going to ask Leah to answer first. And that's, how can students prepare to be successful in a global virtual internship?
Fantastic. So how you measure your success will depend from person to person. For some people, it's about gaining that extra work experience, learning new skills. For others, it will be learning how to adapt and juggle various responsibilities, or growing a network, meeting other people, or simply just to have fun. And the point is that we, through this program with your university and working with a provider, someone who helps you through the decision making, will try to ensure that you are having a successful experience, because there'll be a lot of support provided, and that's quite important as well to help you through the steps of the experience, especially for people to whom it's new. One of the biggest topics that I'm biggest fan of is positive psychology, positive attitude. If you go into the experience with positivity and actually doing something that you want to do, something that you like, and a topic that is important to you and you are learning something, you will be having by default already a successful experience. Practically, tangibly, obviously, there's a lot of hands-on steps that we can provide of how to be successful. Some of these might be very detailed, especially if your internship will only be some time from now. So these factors will be repeated and shared with you again from all different, your university, from Paula, from different, all of us, supporting you through the process. But one of the most important aspects is communicate as well. Firstly, is actually preparation. So essential before, don't wait until your internship starts, until the first day or the first week. You should actually massively read up about the organization. You will be obviously provided with details about the internship because you'll be choosing that project, you'll be approving it. So it won't be a surprise to you. But before you start, you'll be provided with reading material, additional research work. Either depending on the organization, there'll be different training manuals perhaps that they provide as well. And so familiarizing yourself with the organization and how they work will be essential. And then most of you, I'm anticipating, are familiar with the Zoom room setup and working from home. And so if that's not already set up, it would be important to get a desk in an office or a workspace that you're comfortable at, from where you can dedicate yourself to the internship. That will make it more successful than being distracted. When you have virtual calls like these, it's important to think about also what you are perceived like in the call. So be professional, be prepared for the call. Don't sit in your pajamas. Ideally, have your screen at a good angle. Definitely don't eat your cereal during any Zoom calls. We've definitely seen that happen. And it's probably not the end of the world, but it's definitely not preferable. So having that dedicated workspace and being Zoom ready, learning about the organization, essential kind of preparation prior to starting. Then communication. Communication is important in life. It's important in on-site internships. It's important in virtual, remote work. It's important in relationships. And so the more you communicate with the supervisor, the more you clarify what the goals are, the expectations, and you double check that you're on the same page. Let's say starting in your first week, be certain that you understand what the first week tasks are. And then also, working to creating a schedule and a structure would really help. That's something massively important, especially since time zones will come into play in a global setting. So since there's different time zones, you haven't chosen where your internship will be yet, but you could be interning from Shanghai or from Sydney. And so you'll have to adapt and anticipate that you would need to be flexible and adapt to these different time zones. Overlapping with your supervisor's time, at least 2 hours, at least a minimum of 2 hours a day, so that you have that real communication opportunity to be in touch with each other will really make quite a difference. And then again, that schedule, if you're studying part-time or you're doing something else, you have other responsibilities. After about a week or two settling into the internship, you'll really be able to structure that schedule where it works for you and you've adapted, you communicating with your supervisor, and the flow, is much more natural. I think another important point is, since it is a remote experience, you would need to work a little extra, a little harder to make, to stay included and engage with others and supervisors and mentors and other colleagues in an office, in a work environment. So that's an important skill, an important success tip to work on. It's something that will also be important for future employment in any case, is making yourself known, making connections, doing networking within an office, even if it's a remote work environment. Engage with, invite another colleague for a coffee, for a virtual coffee meet, and chat about something else than the obvious tasks. Talk about some other topics of interest. Try and kind of associate with people and across the workspace. Another important point is to learn about the local culture. You'll actually feel more successful if you understand the culture of that country better. If you are able to use the language, or if you're working in a foreign environment where you could maybe practice that language as well, That's always well perceived from others that you work with, is when you make that effort. Another absolute point will be just, again, being proactive, reaching out, asking for feedback, actually, not just waiting for feedback. I find that we often see with our students, our participants, that supervisors are busy. The intention is to provide feedback. The intention is to oversee, especially with a schedule, there is communication. But sometimes feedback might feel like you don't really frequently receive that. And I think the more feedback you ask for, the more you know how you are performing, and the more reassured you feel that you're actually on the right page and on the right track for, excuse me, for what you're trying to achieve. Another point that I think is essential, people realize that sometimes in hindsight, is to document your process, actually document the experience and documenting your achievements. Time flies by very quickly. You think, every day maybe blurs into another. But if you actually keep a little notebook and you write down things, successes, accomplishments, even challenges, those will be topics that you could discuss in a job interview in the future. And they should also be points that you would be able to specifically address in your resume. When you're adding the experience to your resume, you'll remember things that might not, be remembered at a later stage. Being polite, being professional, I think we assume most people would be, but I think across different cultures, maybe people don't realize how they can be perceived. So always just keeping that extra kind of like sharpness about being extra polite and kind of grateful for the experience. After all, a supervisor is dedicating a lot of their time to provide this experience to you as well. And so that kind of gratitude just comes back to the positive experience, the positive psychology of having a successful internship experience. So yeah, I think that is my feedback for right now.
Thank you. There were a couple questions that came through that still relate to the topic of this question. So I'm going to go ahead and ask part of those questions now, and anyone can feel free to answer. The first one is, how early should you start preparing to apply for a virtual internship?
That's a great question. And you can never prepare too early, right? You always want to kind of think about it. I think what COVID taught us is that great laid plans can often go awry as well. With virtual internships, when you're working with a provider like Connect 123, virtual internships or global experiences, they'll all have their own application process. And for virtual internships, we actually can take an application from 6 weeks out and then deliver it 6 weeks later. So you can actually have a much closer window of application to delivery versus an in-person internship. But of course, the earlier apply, the more you will know, the sooner you will know, and the more ability you'll have to prep and plan and deliver to success when you actually go to your virtual internship.
Yeah, definitely. If you're working with a provider or someone who's helping to organize that virtual internship for you, you'll want to look at the deadlines page on their website. There are other virtual internships that are not necessarily organized through a provider, and they're just offered as an alternative to other in-person internships. For example, in our office, we have a virtual internship for students who are working as a UN Sustainable Development Goals intern for our Office of Global Affairs. And for that virtual internship, the timeline was much shorter, right? We didn't need 6 weeks necessarily. We posted it, we recruited students, and they pretty much started shortly after. So it's all going to depend on how you find your internship and where you end up going. The other question that relates to being successful in a virtual internship that Leah, you mentioned a few times in your response, was talking about making sure you're adapting to and understanding who your supervisor is, who are your coworkers, especially in different cultural contexts. And so this question is, how do you acclimate to different work cultures during a virtual global internship?
Absolutely. There's work culture, and then there's actual, country culture as well. So there's various cultures that you'd have to kind of feel the water, the temperature, measure the temperature. And basically every organization is a little different. We'll have a different culture. Some, if it's a startup or it's a much more entrepreneurial environment, or it's a nonprofit organization working on human rights, every kind of organization will have a different organizational culture. And so therefore be either a little bit, more formal or less formal. So that will be one of the things that you will learn to understand, like what's the communication style. Is that supervisor, more informal, quite chatty, or are they actually a little distant? So there's those kind of nuances that are often obviously slightly harder to come to terms with when you're not physically in an office setting. And that's something that's actually essential to already anticipate. When it comes to cultural differences, usually we feel that language becomes kind of a larger part of the culture. And so the important part would be that you have a project that you are comfortable with, where the language is not a problem, that you don't feel that you aren't able to produce the work in that kind of, where that becomes a hurdle or a burden. And then through, I guess, virtual events and get-togethers and gatherings, we try to kind of compensate for anything culturally informing people, sending interesting snippets, really kind of like filling the 4-dimensional space with additional experiences for everybody, what they might not be experiencing in a country physically. So I'm not sure if that answered the question, if someone else wants to add to that.
Okay, we'll move on. Thank you for that. And I will move along to our next question, which is for Kelly. If you could talk about what transferable skills can students apply from global virtual internships that will support in-person future success?
Sure. Thanks, Paula. I'm going to echo a few of the things that my colleagues have said. You've heard a bit about kind of skill building, and that's what we do in internships, right? That's one of the reasons that we encourage students to try an internship even before they try a job, because they're literally trying it on for size. So all three of us work in a lot of different career fields. So there could be psychology students, business students, chem students, all different ranges, and everyone can benefit a little bit differently from an internship, whether it's virtual or otherwise. So transferable skills is a big buzz phrase, right? You've heard this a lot. But it is important to kind of think of the language. So when you're thinking about it, think about the literal transfer. So you are at one point a student, you are in a classroom or not, you're at home on your couch, but you are learning. So you're having this academic piece of your career. And so when you leave a typical classroom or a virtual one, and you do something different, typically an internship, could be service learning, kind of that other experience. You're really taking what you learned in the classroom and putting it into this other experience. And when you do that, there are plenty of things that you're going to gain there at an internship that you're going to transfer back into the classroom and also forward into a future opportunity. So Jillian brought up a really good point earlier, the difference between hard and soft skills. So I think it's important to think about those. When you think of hard skills, we just heard Leah talk about the benefits of being bilingual or multilingual. That's considered a hard skill. When you think about your own career field or your academic major, things that you might be working on. So you could be working on databases. You could be a boss at Adobe software. Maybe you're working in Photoshop. If you spend a lot of time in there, that's considered a hard skill. So those are certain things that you might be putting into play in an internship or in a future job as well. If you're thinking about soft skills, they can be things like, I am a good communicator. I work well on a team. I am creative. I am a problem solver. So they're both equally important, and there are some that develop easier than others, right? So when we're in the classroom, oftentimes we're working on hard skills first. If you are the student who is a computer science major, you are working in specific programs and gaining specific skills for those programs. So when you write up your CV and you make those edits on your resume, you're listing those programs out that you work with. Soft skills are a little bit harder to describe. They don't often make an appearance on the resume. And so it's important to think about the different things that you might say about yourself. And so when you're speaking in an interview or you're working at an internship and you think about, well, what am I working on right now? a lot of times you might see some things that appeal to you in the job description to begin with. So if you're looking for a job or an internship, you're looking at tasks. One of my colleagues mentioned that earlier. So when you think about what you're actually going to do while you're working, that's the really important part. A lot of students can also be drawn to brand names, working at big companies, working at Google or Facebook or other places like that. But if the position is for an accounting student and you're really interested in marketing, it's not going to be a good fit. So we talked about the importance of cultural fit as well. So when you're talking about transferable skills and thinking about, well, what's going on in the virtual internship, some of the big aspects that we've touched on today are going to be things like your space, right? What kind of physical space are you working in and how can you speak about that, right? Are you productive at home? What does that look like? What does your schedule look like? How have you built yourself both space and time to work in a way that is productive and useful? Can you also do that in an office? I find that I'm more productive at home. So that's always an interesting one for me. There's no water cooler time. I'm not in the kitchen talking with colleagues making coffee. But Leah brings up a great point, which is have a virtual coffee with somebody. And we're all tired of Zoom happy hours, but it doesn't hurt to get on the phone with somebody one-on-one. Use the phone if you're tired of Zoom. It's okay. No one will judge you. You can still have the coffee. Being able to network in a virtual internship is something that I often hope that students are working on as well, because the first thing is communication. You're communicating with your coworkers, your supervisor, probably somebody back on your campus as well, but you're also networking. So it looks a little different when you're in this Zoom setup, right? So transferable skills come up when you are talking about, I connected with this coworker on this project and I learned this different thing about myself. If there are things that you notice a coworker or your supervisor do really well, you can ask them about it. And I think, especially if you pick up the phone and you don't have video, you have a lot of leeway to ask a lot of open questions and they're flexible as well. You can also send those questions ahead of time to have a bit of an informational interview. So transferable skills that come directly out of a virtual internship as opposed to an in-person internship, you're going to see a lot of the same stuff, I think, in both environments, but in the virtual setting, a lot is intensified. How do you communicate? Right? So if you are in an office setting, your communication might look a little bit different than it does when you are behind your laptop. And so thinking about different types of communication, not only how you like to communicate, how you like to receive information, but how do others like to receive information as well? Are you versatile in terms of Zoom, Slack, using email, picking up the phone when you need to, not always being in your inbox? Those sorts of things are important to talk about. Think about solving problems and how do you do that as well. So talking about a mix of hard skills and soft skills, I think internships are available in a lot of different career fields. So you have the opportunity to talk about both of those and then also focus. So when you're thinking about the tasks that you would like to be doing in those internships, you can also think about how you would like to work on certain skills that you could build, whether it's learning a new program or figuring out how to work better in a team when all of you are sitting somewhere else. That's it.
Thank you, Kelly. Leah or Jillian, do you have anything to add about that?
I think the greatness of transferable skills is that they can be applied to multiple jobs and the jobs don't have to be the same. And so a lot of times when you're looking at internships or virtual internships, we are thinking, well, I study this, so I must absolutely directly, specifically work in this company doing this exact thing. And really what transferable skills means is that you can work in anything and you can take that transferable experience and then adapt it to somewhere else. And as Kelly noted, you have a lot more that are really highlighted through virtual. We asked all of our students this summer, like, what advice would you give to students? Like, what are you thinking is coming out of that? And the two things they all said, and this was an open-ended question, was time management and communication. And so these are the transferable skills students were able to walk away with. They struggled with it a little bit, but they were able to adapt and succeed at it and then walk away with those two skills that they can then apply to their schoolwork, future jobs, and whatnot.
Thank you.
Yeah, and a virtual internship probably forces that more, so it's actually kind of like, it's really a much more direct way of actually gaining those skills than probably in an office setting. So it's actually, you armed much better afterwards, I would say.
This question relates to this question as well from a student, especially as you were talking about hard skills and soft skills and what students are actually doing and what they're gaining in their internship. This question is, what can you expect to do in a global virtual internship? Is it very hands-on as it would be for an in-person internship?
So good. Great question. I think both Leah and Jillian will agree. This really depends on the area that you're working in, right? So let's use fashion as an industry. You could do fashion design, fashion business, fashion marketing. If you are in a situation where you're doing that in person, you're probably in a studio, you're prepping for fashion week, you are hands-on with garments, you're working directly with clients and also with your coworkers. That kind of work is going to look different virtually. Doesn't mean that you can't do it. It still means that you can get different aspects of it, I would say. So instead of perhaps having a direct focus on being there in person and kind of that chaos and that feel for when you're there in a very busy, let's say, fashion studio, if you are online and contributing to the same kind of work, maybe you're focusing a bit more on the event planning piece or the marketing or the social media aspect, or thinking about how to get the word out in a virtual way. So one thing that's super interesting now with events in particular is that some people are having a lower marketing budget. Some folks are finding that the event will now be virtual when it used to be in person. So there's a ton of, we're overusing the word pivot, but there it is. There's a lot of flexibility, and the need to pivot, I think, is so cool in these internships. I think this is also teaching both us and our interns a lot of flexibility. So if you find yourself thinking, I don't think I can do environmental science now because I really wanted to do something in the field. I wanted to be in Australia. I wanted to work on, something there. You could work with a professor who's doing research on the area that was interesting to you, and you can be paired up virtually. And then maybe in the future, you go there in person. So it does set you up for a future as well. I think there for certain will be differences depending on your career field, but both can be rewarding, and it kind of opens your mind a bit as to how you could do something without physically being in a place.
Thank you. Jillian, did you have something you wanted to add to that, or did Kelly answer it for you?
I think Kelly did a great job on that. I think the acknowledgement really simply is in virtual, there are going to be differences, right? I can't say that a virtual internship is the exact same as an in-person, but a lot of the tasks and what you're doing and the projects and the relationships that you're building are still really there. And a lot of what our students say at the end is, I was surprised that I got a relationship with my supervisor, with my coworkers, and more. And so that ability is still there, whether you don't have that in-person water cooler culture, you still have the chats, the Zoom meetings, and more to build those connections, deliver projects, and actually really rise to a successful internship.
Great, thank you. I'm going to ask this next question, and then I'm going to actually advance to the next slide to talk about some options through UC virtual internships, and then we'll come back to the question as well, just because it relates. This question talks again about process or timeline from application to internship, and they also ask, what are the costs associated with virtual internships, if any? And so there definitely are some costs associated with virtual internships, especially if you go down the route of working with a provider, which is a really good idea. There's definitely benefits of working with a provider. But before I have our panelists answer that question, I'm going to just let you all know about some virtual internships and resources that are available through the UC system. And these internships, virtual internships through the UC system, are open to all students. And so I am mentioning this now because it kind of does touch a little bit on timeline for our internships through UC. And also, I'll let you know that for the first 3 examples here, there are costs associated with the internship. And with those costs, you also get certain things like credit and support and placement in your internship. But the first place that you might be interested in looking at UC opportunities for virtual internships is UC Berkeley's virtual global internships. They actually offer both domestic and international virtual internships for UC credit. They are open to all students, and applications open on February 1st, 2021. Their applications are reviewed on a first come, first served basis. The second place you might look for virtual internships within the UC system are through UC Education Abroad program, virtual international internships. So UC EAP is our system-wide study abroad program, and they are partnering with a provider to offer students the opportunity to choose an internship placement based on your academic and professional goals. Their internship program is 8 weeks long, and students receive UC credit. The next opportunity that I want to make sure everybody is aware of is UC Davis's virtual summer internships. These are also open to all students, and they allow students to earn UC credit while gaining cross-cultural and professional work experience in diverse fields without the need to travel. Our enrollment opens on January 6th, and like UC Berkeley, programs fill on a first completed, first reserved basis. Also, I wanted to just mention that the providers that are here as panelists today, we work with for our virtual internships in our UC Davis portfolio. If you're interested in learning more about UC Davis virtual internships, there is a Q&A session today from 4:30 to 5 as part of the Global Learning Showcase. Before we finish, I just wanted to share one more resource that you might want to check out. If you're looking for an internship that's not necessarily for UC credit, UC Davis does have a virtual internships resource page with links to many other internship opportunities. A lot of them are providers that offer virtual internships that you might want to check out, many of whom do also partner with UCs if you would like academic credit. And we also have resources such as Handshake. If your UC has Handshake as a tool through your Career Center, you might want to check that out. I know our Internship and Career Center just recently created a remote tab for internships, so students can search for internships that are have opportunities for remote work. Similarly, we have a resource through Going Global that most UCs have access to, where students can search for millions of jobs and internships and use various keywords to find virtual and remote and telework opportunities. So going back to the questions, and this would be a good time for me to actually just advance the slide again to our questions page to make sure we answer everyone's questions. Did any of the panelists have anything to comment on about costs associated with virtual internships, and maybe what you might want to add that is included in the costs when there are costs associated with virtual internships?
Sure. So I think working with a provider, one of the biggest differences, and probably a good way to explain this, is if you were getting a domestic internship, you would, back in the day, you would walk into the business, but now you're going to email them or call them and hand in your resume. You're probably responding to a job post or you're cold calling, and then you are handling all of that yourself as the applicant. So when you work with any of our 3 companies, we are doing that work for you. So that's one of the things that when you think about, well, why does this cost something? Why is there a fee? And that's because we're doing the hard yards. So we're taking your resume and going through our employer network and trying to make a match. And so that's where the fee goes. So there's staff time associated. It's also typically curriculum oriented. So there are some really cool pieces of curriculum that will walk alongside you. For example, CRCC has Career Bridge, which is awesome. GE does a similar teleworking program that goes alongside the students, so you can have live check-ins. Those sorts of things take time to develop and also take staff time to deliver. So the support is kind of what you should think of when you're like, why is there a fee for this? When you're on the ground, you're paying for bigger things, right? Housing and social events and cultural events. All those things except housing. We're not going to give you a couch and to sit on and a house to sit in this time. The things that are being included are all created to kind of supplement your experience and make it even better. So that's often why fees are included. And then of course, if you decide to earn credit, then you're looking at tuition as well.
Thank you, Kelly. I did receive a question about the UC virtual internships that I was sharing, which asks, are they part-time or full-time? And do they take place during the normal academic semester or quarters? I can definitely speak for UC Davis and UC EAP, but I also believe this is the case for Berkeley's as well, that these virtual internship programs take place in the summer and are considered full-time. Usually they're anywhere from 25 to 35 hours a week or so. And maybe Leah, Kelly, Jillian, if you could just confirm approximate hours per week for your internship programs, is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, great. And then one other question, and I know we're just about at time. So if you do have to go, appreciate you being here, but we're almost done. A student asks, if they already have an internship for the beginning of summer 2021, should I still get a virtual internship abroad for the second half of the summer, or is that too much?
So I had this great student. They applied to our program. They were ready to commit 30 hours a week. We found them a host company and everything. It then comes out that they have a master's program and a part-time job. So let me clarify, virtual internships has a lot of accessibility, but you cannot do a 30-hour virtual experience, a job, and a degree all at the same time. With that said, if you would like to look at your summer and you think you can do one internship and then the other and you won't get burnt out and you think it will be dynamic, it will allow you to enhance your resume and you can handle that, then absolutely, I don't think that's too much. But I think you should really ask yourself, what are your end goals when you're trying to get this? Why are you doing back-to-back? Is there an opportunity for you to have rest and mental health and awareness while you're getting this summer break and professional development? And then create a plan of action. Like I said, virtual internships is really accessible, allows you to fit in a lot, but try to make sure that you're fitting in enough, not too much, when you're really developing the kind of academic plan.
Thank you very much. We will stick around if anyone does have any questions. I'll just note that this session was part of a UC-wide initiative, and so many of our participants are coming from all of our UCs. It's not over yet, so there are events happening all of this week, and so we encourage you to check out the Global Learning Showcase, Global Virtual Fall Fairs, virtual open houses. They all have a different name, but they all are open to students, and you might find some really interesting opportunities available. Does anyone else have any questions while we are still here? And if there's any question that I missed in the chat, feel free to just resend it. No. All right. Well, I'll give it a couple more minutes if anyone has a question. If not, thank you so much for coming, and we hope to see you at another event this week. And big thank you to our panelists as well. I appreciate you all for being here.